Greg, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa ko ingarangi no koti rana ti whakapapa rangi mai inari. This is not Dutch. That's right. No manua tu o ko aututahi te whenua tupu, ko tamaki makaurau ti kainga, ko o ti tumu whakarau o ti raupu, kai whakamahi hangarau o Aotearoa, ko Craiganga hau tēnā tātou katoa. That's Te Reo Māori. So it's very important to those of us from New Zealand that we open with our background, where we come from. And so I've just said my pepeha. Now I'm practicing and getting better at te reo. So the te reo means language. So te reo Māori is Māori language. In Māori were the first people who came to the islands of Aotearoa, which is the land of the long white cloud. Which was then named New Zealand. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. So basically what I've told you is tēnā koutou katoa, which is welcome and thank you for coming. My background is my forefathers and mothers come from England and Scotland. I don't know if you've done your DNA, but it turns out I'm more Scottish than I thought. I'm 25%. So I really should be wearing a kilt. I was born in the Manawatu, which is an area in the North Island. I grew up in a place called Christchurch. Who's been to Christchurch? There's some people, yes, thank you very much. But I live in Auckland. So Auckland is Tamaki Makaurau. I am the CEO of the Technology Users Association of New Zealand. My name is Craig Young. It's great to be here. So that's my story. I brought a couple of props up. I'm pretty much sure you know what this is. When I was young, which is a long time ago, my grandfather grew these, and they were called Chinese gooseberries. Literally, that's the name they were. And then some smart person in New Zealand marketing decided to call them kiwi fruit. So you probably know these just as kiwi. I mean, they really aren't. They're kiwi fruit. I'm a kiwi, but not really. A kiwi is a flightless bird that is our national bird. So if you, I just wanted to just put that right a little bit. Does anyone want the kiwi? Yeah, I've got plenty of them at home, by the way. So look, I want to acknowledge, right, there we are. I want to acknowledge the venue. Thank you very much for having us here. Amazing venue. We feel very much at home, my wife and I. We spent 2 days in Amsterdam, which is really, well, I want to put it politely, but quite crowded and close in, very historical, certainly not like New Zealand. And we live 35 kilometres north of Auckland in a seaside town. So when we came here yesterday afternoon, it felt like almost like coming home, even though it wasn't the same, but it's very similar. I want to acknowledge the team for BTG for their warm welcome, for Anne-Marie particularly for putting up with all my questions that I asked her beforehand, and of course my colleague and dear friend Petra Clausen from BTG. She said I had to mention BTG. I said BTG's everywhere, but BTG. Where is she? BTG. Yeah, thank you. Who heard that I was heading over to Europe and so invited me along today. We're very fortunate to have her participate in one of our conferences earlier in the year. Unfortunately, she was unable to fly, but she sent us a video. And so literally, I come to you from a place 18,000 kilometres away. And we share a history which I want to talk to you about a little bit as we go. I did ask Google Gemini for a joke that included Dutch and Kiwi, which I thought was a bit dangerous. I got 3 jokes back. 2 of them were no good. Try this one. We'll see what happens with this one. Where's my good friend? She's going to put up the laugh sign. Okay, here we go. I'll give you a bit of context. On the left-hand side is Milford Sound. That is one of our prestigious places that you need to visit. We call New Zealand God's Own. And there's lots of adverts in New Zealand about God's Own, etc. So here's a joke. Don't blame me, blame Google Gemini. A Kiwi and a Dutchman are arguing over whose country is more impressive. The Kiwi says, look, God created New Zealand on his best day. He gave us the Southern Alps, the fjords, the thermal pools, and the beaches. It's God's own country. The Dutchman nods and says, yes, God created the earth, that is true, but the Netherlands, we created that ourselves. Okay, so I sort of got it. I put this picture up not just to show you how beautiful New Zealand is, but is to say there is a connection between the two countries, and that is water. We have a lot of it. It's not quite the same as you, where you've got it, in loads, but we have a lot of it that rains on us. We have a lot of it that runs down rivers. Most of our electricity is hydroelectricity because it's through the rivers. But it is all about water. How do you manage water? And we're going to talk a little bit about in this session today, better keep it on the time, about some of the unique things about New Zealand. I do have a gift for someone. This is a world-famous beanie, because I know it gets cold in Holland, which is a two-hands beanie. This is I can probably guarantee this is the only one in Holland, if not Europe, if not the Northern Hemisphere, that will go to the person who can tell me who these two people are, and not the Kiwi, not the guy from New Zealand. Can anyone tell me who those two are? Okay. Yes, and the other one? No clue. They're Dutch. They're both Dutch. Okay. Oh, there goes the beanie. Oh, well, okay. First good question comes up there. So on the left is Abel Tasman. I can't pronounce his middle name because my Dutch is so poor. He was an explorer, a merchant. He worked for the Dutch East India Company. He was based out of Jakarta. He was commissioned to find the great southern continent. So we think his most significant achievement was 1640, 1642, he found New Zealand. Now, it wasn't for the first time because Māori were already living there, but he was the first European to come across the country, the islands of New Zealand. But he never actually set foot on New Zealand. We have quite a few things named after him. We have Abel Tasman National Park. If you've ever come to New Zealand, it is a fantastic national park to walk through. It is quite flat, so you'll be quite used to it, because a lot of our national parks go up quite steeply and down quite steeply. So that one is quite stunning. We have the Tasman District, and then we have the Tasman Sea. That's the piece of water between us and the other people that live down there, called Australians. Never ask a New Zealander if they're an Australian. Can I just give you that hint? Always say to someone with an accent like mine, are you New Zealand or Australia? Never say to them, are you Australian? Because we really don't like it. So the Tasman Sea. And the speaker that's coming after me is your Chinese expert. I was just talking to him beforehand. We recently had an uninvited visitor in the Tasman Sea, a Chinese warship, which sailed down between Australia and New Zealand and undertook live firing without any warning. And so they did give short warning to aircraft flying over, because there's lots of planes flying between New Zealand and Australia. But a fascinating little story around how close we are to China. The person on the right is my favourite Dutchman at the moment. This is Fabian Holland. He's born here in the Netherlands in 2002, but he's now a New Zealand resident professional rugby union player, and he plays for the All Blacks. You can see it on there. They are the best rugby team in the world. At the moment, South Africa's better, but we are overall the best. He loved rugby so much when he started playing for it, he moved to New Zealand at the age of 16 to attend boys' high. He is 2.04 metres tall. He only came for 6 months, but he loved it so much that he stayed. He represented New Zealand in the under-20s. He is now, this year, he created history by being the first Dutch-born All Black. So you should be very proud of him. But even more than that, This year, he was announced as World Rugby's Breakthrough Player of the Year. So he is a world-class athlete, and he's yours. But he plays for us. If you want him to play for you, he has to take 3 years off. The other thing I want to talk about New Zealand and how close we are to Holland is after World War II, we have a diaspora in New Zealand of Dutch. There's quite a lot of people that left Holland after the war and came to New Zealand. They fit in very well. Thank you very much for sending them, because now we have decent coffee, we have decent restaurants, we have some tulip farming, and there's about 10,000 of them in New Zealand. This slide, I wanted to just talk about the difference between us. So New Zealand has about 5.5 million people. So it's not a lot of people. You guys have about 17.9 or 18 million according to Google. I did do my research. This slide shows you the size of our country compared to Europe. Because what you see when you look at the maps is we look like we're similar size to the UK, but we're not. We're about 6.5 times the size of the Netherlands. We are three main islands, the North Island, the South Island, and this is called Stewart Island, or Rakiura. And then can you see there's a little bit of blue over here? That's called the Chatham Islands, so that is part of New Zealand as well, so it's quite away from the mainland. So we are 6.5 times bigger than you. To drive from the top of the North Island to the bottom, which you can do because there's a ferry that goes across here, it's 2,006 kilometres. I've driven most of it. In the Netherlands, I've just got this from Google. It says it's 306 kilometres, right from the top. Our highest point, which is Mount Cook, which is about there, is 3,700 metres tall, and yours is something about 300 metres. So that's why I say to you, Abel Tasman Park is probably the best one to walk, because the others have all got pretty tall mountains. GDP per capita, we're about $48,000 a year. You're 68,000, so you are definitely a higher earning country than we are. But you have more bikes than people. 1.3 per person, apparently. But we have more sheep. 4.5 per person. We have 4.5 per person sheep. So we are literally on the other side of the world. If you drilled a hole from the middle of New Zealand through the core, you'd come out in northern Spain. That's sort of the relative distance that we are. So we are a South Pacific nation, mainly New Zealand European, with Maori as the second largest group, and then Asians, the third biggest migrated group. We're at the bottom of this huge Pacific Ocean with the two biggest economies on that ocean as well. So you have the USA to the northeast, and you have China to the northwest. And it takes about the same amount of time to fly from Auckland to either of those countries. China is our biggest trading partner by far. We are in with China all the way when it comes to trade. But the USA is our biggest defense partner. So you can see we have a very interesting position where we try to straddle the two and be kind and find a way through. So I'm very interested to hear what your view on China and what's coming down that track. I've been very fortunate to go to China. I've been to Shenzhen and Shanghai with Huawei, who have been a large part in New Zealand, although they weren't allowed to build the 5G networks, which I think is pretty common around the world. Just quickly, this slide, I wanted to show you this this is from the Network Resilience, Network Readiness Index from Portugal's, just to show you we're very similar when it comes to, governance. We're both very strong social democracies. We both have monarchs, although ours does not live in our country. Ours lives in England, of all things. But we are still we still have King Charles. Don't worry, we won't get into that. We're both small countries that punch above our weight. We both do well at Olympics, which I think, we do. We don't do very well at football. I'll give you that. But we've both won the same number of World Cups, right? Oh, that didn't go down well. But while you are, I'll just go back one, while you are the gateway to Europe, you are a central hub, you are right in the middle there, we are right at the end of the line. I always like to joke that we're the last bus stop before Antarctica. You've got to get off it out. If you're going to not go to Antarctica, you've got to get off the bus in New Zealand because otherwise you're going to end up. But that actually defines, who we are. But the thing that is quite common is that our leaders are all seeing the same issues. Escalating cybersecurity risks, digital inclusion, bridging the tech talent gap, accelerating technology, the second year of pervasive generative AI, and what do you do with data? How do you make use of it, and how do you govern it? So I want to talk about some of those things. Yes, that is the back of my head. And that young fella there, Derek, he is an entrepreneur. He worked for our national airline Air New Zealand, but then went out and started his own AI company. So there are these little pockets of innovation occurring in New Zealand, which are pretty exciting. The first one I want to talk about is responsible generative AI. And most of you will be aware of this. It is one of those amazing technologies that can do so much, and yet we struggle often to figure out what to do with it. The key challenge is we've had this over-exuberance around the technology, but what do we actually do with it? We've got an urgent need for governance. Now, we in New Zealand, our current government is right-leaning and has decided not to regulate AI. Decided to follow the rest of the world. Can I just mute for a sec, please? I picked up a cold on the aeroplane over, so just the tail end of it. We've decided not to regulate. We're going to watch what you do and what the EU does. We're not going to watch what the US does. We know that we all need to leverage what our vendors are providing because everybody's putting AI in, and we need to focus on workforce capability and ethical use. Safety and security online. Crime never sleeps. Now, during COVID, we were incredibly fortunate, being 18,000 kilometres away from Europe, being an island nation. It takes 3 hours to fly from our country to the nearest country. We were able to close our borders. And so we had a year or two where we had no COVID at all while everybody else was going through it. We did have to open our borders and cope with some of it, but we can't do that with cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, because we're connected, we are, microseconds away from the rest of the world. So we can't afford to be, we're just the same as you. We cannot afford to step back. In fact, we've got an expansion of our risk profile because people are using New Zealand as a stepping stone. Because our people are not overly concerned about cybersecurity because they think they're miles away from everyone, hackers are using us as a jumping point off to other countries. And those state-sponsored threats that we heard about earlier just apply to us just as much as anybody else. Smart nations, cities and resiliency. I think this is one for us where we're not doing a lot in the space of smart cities. New Zealand's cities are not big. And most of our cities, apart from Auckland, don't even know what traffic jams are. Seriously. So where most of the work is going when it comes to smart is around traffic management, particularly in Auckland. But there's very little else going into that space. Where the real space and the effort's going to, which I'm sure is top of mind for you as well, is around resiliency of the networks. It is particularly around the concern over physical climate change and what that's doing to our network. So that's somewhere where we can obviously speak very closely together about. And then innovation. This is probably where we're falling away, and I don't know what the situation is in in Holland. You can tell me about that after we finished. But we've suddenly become very risk averse. And our CIOs are championing at the bit, complaining about their boards not taking risk. And I think it's a post-COVID thing. But we really don't see, we have little pockets of innovation, but a lack of clear government strategy. We have talent constraints because we are at the bottom of the world. We have a big country 3 hours away from us where the pay is way better than it is in New Zealand. The Australian economy continues to grow because basically they run out of money, they just dig something else up and sell it. And that's just as a little aside, that's why Australia is so important in the geopolitical environment, because they do have a lot of minerals and resources. So they do see China as a real threat, whereas we don't see it because we don't have that. So just a couple of things to finish up with around New Zealand. The first thing is the tyranny of distance. This is where we are very different. We are so far away from anywhere. You can see, if you look down here, you know, the number of, I just put this one up because it sort of gave a sense of the number of cables, internet cables coming to New Zealand is about 3. And then you look at you guys, you know, one of your cables breaks, what do? You just go around another cable. For us, we've got to get the ship out, and it might be somewhere in the Atlantic, you know, it's got to come and fix it. We're certainly not the worst. When I started this job 11 years ago, we had 1 cable. Now we have 3. So that's a big issue for us. But once we do have those, it is a safe place to put stuff. So we are seeing a huge growth in data centers. You know, Amazon, AWS, Microsoft, Google, our own providers. There's a huge growth in this and also because most of our power is renewables. So you've got that going. The second thing is the difficulty of geography. You know, we're a long, skinny nation, not many people, sheep don't use phones. So you've got to put these cell towers in places. And also you don't want necessarily to have cell towers, you know, in places where you want people to go as tourists. But tourists want to be able to use their phone when they're in New Zealand. So that's a big difficulty for us. Whereas, well, you're flat, basically, right? You've got a flat country, which must have its own issues anyway. But and the other one I did want to talk about briefly is this one. So this came about from a conversation we had with Intug a couple of months ago, which is data sovereignty. So we sort of look at Europe and think that's one big, you know, group, and you're not really worried about where in that EU thing is your data. That's how we see it. That's how we look at it. For us, so having the conversation about data sovereignty around where does your Dutch data sit was an eye-opener to us. But we have a second layer that goes across that, and that is a cultural layer. So data in, when you talk to Māori and Pacifica, so people from Pacific nations, Indigenous people, it's a gift, it's a taonga. It is something held tightly. And so they want, and it's not just statistics. Data to them is their way of life, tikanga, which is the, you know, the way they do things, their creations. That is their data. It's governed by cultural values. They you know, they do have different values from New Zealand Europeans. And it is about where does that data sit and who owns that data. And I think that's going to be a big issue, not just for us, but other countries. You know, you have you know, countries that you've been colonial masters of, and you've got bits and pieces. I see you, bits and pieces that you have. So this cultural data sovereignty concept's coming. And the last one I want to talk about, says I've still got 44 seconds, is about encouraging developing talent. Because I think everybody has this issue. We do not have enough women in technology. We do not have enough Indigenous people. For us, that's Māori and Pacifica. We do not have enough of those people for 2 reasons. The first thing is they bring a different lens. And that different lens is incredibly important. And for New Zealanders, te ao Māori or having Māori gives us uniqueness and a selling point. The second point is you're missing out on a huge talent pool. You know, why would you just pick the white guys? You know, we're okay, but there's a lot more people out there. This is a group of 9 Māori and Pacific students that we brought into town. We took them to Google, we took them to Worldline, we took them to one of our big banks, we took them to one of our big telcos and showed them what it was like to have a job in technology. They had no idea there were so many different ways they could do it. And we have groups that we work with. We collaborate with Tech NZ and IT professionals. We do things like we have Women in Tech. We run a Future Leaders program called Flint. Interesting thing about those two in particular, for Flint, we have rules like you would never have a manel. So do you know what a manel is? That's a panel of all men. So you have to have gender balance at the front of the room. So all our Flint events must have gender balance. So that's how we're bringing that sort of thing into it. And then I just wanted to finish off with the number 8 wire versus the polder model, which is where I think, you know, we can certainly help each other a lot. I'm going to get my notes back because just so I get the polder model, what I was going to say. We have this idea in New Zealand that we can fix anything and everything with a piece of number 8 wire. Don't ask me why it's called number 8, but it is a piece of wire. We fix our tractors with it. We fix our doors with it. And so we say we can fix anything with number 8. We fix anything, but it's agile, it's scrappy, and we hack it together. Whereas from what I've been reading, you know, the Dutch are much more like our Māori, which is you have a much longer view, you know, 50, 100-year view. And we need more of that. And where I think that particularly, you know, Dutch companies could do more with Māori companies because you have that long view. So I want to finish with this proverb. Nā tā raurau, nā tāku rau, ka ora āti iwi, which means with your food basket and my food basket, the people will thrive. In other words, we're better when we share knowledge together. So many thanks for your time. If you want to connect, find me on LinkedIn, but otherwise, thank you so much for having me.
Not that bad, Greg, on time.
Oh, okay.
No.
I didn't see any green balls or...
No, I was
oh, yeah.
almost looking at your time. So there's one question I need to ask because we don't have another time, Greg, but... Okay. You've done a lot of research in the Netherlands, right? So also one of the things also we talked about last night a little bit is about the discussion we have in the Netherlands around big tech.
Yes.
And you mentioned, of course, that China and the US are, US from a defense perspective, China from an economic perspective. How do you look at this discussion we're having as in the Netherlands around big tech, the interdependency we have from big US company? How is that? So 2 questions I have. Is that discussion also taking place in your end of the world? And how do you look at the discussion taking place in the Netherlands?
Yes.
Greg. All right. Thank you, Greg.
Yes, absolutely. You know, the reliance on, I talked about Microsoft, AWS building data centers. You know, you're allowing these companies to come into your country. You know, you need them because they've got the investment. But the other side of it is, you know, they're bringing their own values and they're bringing the way they do things. And in the end, they can say to you, well, we're never going to take your data somewhere else. But do you really trust them? And yes, there are very good people in the organisation. So yes, I think we all need to have that conversation around how much do you want these people and how much do you trust them. Like, you know, Huawei, just as an example, we're a major network provider in New Zealand pre-5G. Yeah. In fact, 2 of the 3 networks were Huawei, and then the New Zealand government decided they were too risky. And yet, the biggest data breach we've had, or the biggest breach that we've had around back in that period where people were listening in on calls was actually American. It was actually the CIA listening in on an American network. So, you know, it's a very tricky position to find ourselves in. Yeah. And do I know nothing about the Netherlands, mate?
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
You traveled a long way to get here, so thank you for sharing your story. What would you hope to get out of your visit when you come back? After this group is, of course, connecting on LinkedIn, you're sharing your presentation. What would you like to take away with you?
I think it really comes back to that last thing, is that last proverb that I shared. You know, it is about sharing what we know. We might be completely opposite sides of the world, but we have a lot of the same issues. We're dealing with a lot, and so we want to learn from each other. And so that's the beauty of, doing things with Petra, working on intake, etc., is being able to share those comments. But it's also the learnings, like, the data sovereignty issue around Māori, etc., may not be top of priority for you, but it's actually quite an interesting thing to think about.
Thank you. Warm applause. Greg Young.
Thank you.
Thank you.